Hello, how's everybody doing? I thought I'd make a video and talk about a subject if I can. It's late here, so I have to keep my voice down. I hate that I can't just speak up and be myself, but I can't. Um, I thought I would make a video talking about a subject that needs to be talked about. And we talk about, that we don't get no sympathy from others, especially the sub five men and the incel type men. They don't get any sympathy at all. And, we get mocked and ridiculed and, um, and everything else. Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think they don't have any sympathy? I think the obvious answer, which I figure most of you know, but I thought I would make this and just kind of hear me out. They have no idea what you're going through. No idea. Many of them have never been in your position. Ever. And the ones that have tried to get out of that position as quickly as they could. Quickly as they could. Take the worst group of people that will probably not understand your situation, the boomers. If you have anybody, if you have boomer parents, I know some of you probably now don't. You have Gen X parents, but I'm at the tail end of Generation X. I'm right at the beginning of the millennial generation, but my parents, of course, were boomers, and my mom has no idea of this stuff. She doesn't understand it. Would my dad? Probably not either. But why do they not understand? Well, look at the ages that. Well, let me go back because I don't want to outdo my topic here. What is the most important thing in just about most people's lives? Meeting somebody and getting married. Meeting somebody and getting married. Well, the boomer generation, most of them did get married. Now, I understand they led the generation in divorce. So, that's a topic for another day. But they definitely led the generation in marriage. Marriage was very healthy with them as far as getting married. And of course, the generation right before them, the World War II generation, the greatest generation as they were called, they had the lowest divorce rates. So, what what would they know about any of this? But, most of them aren't here now. But, the boomers, though, they got married. And here's the thing. Yeah, the divorce rate went up. But, like, where I live, now there were divorces. Don't get me wrong. There were quite a few divorces, but most people I knew stayed married. Stayed married. And they got married very young. So, what in the world are they going to be able to understand our situation? Most of them dated, probably about 16 to 17 years old was probably their first date. Some probably might have even been before that. And many of them were married probably as early as 18 years old, right out of high school, and as late as probably, 23, 24, maybe 25, And that was probably the 25-year-olds were what would be considered today the incels. That would be them today. But, that was about as late as they got married. I was still positive before my 25th birthday. I was still a fairly positive. Yeah, I had my depression and I had, because I didn't have a woman and all that. I was still pretty positive. All in all. And, how would they understand the situation we're in when, my father got married at 20 years old. My mother was 23. I've said before, my mom might have been a career woman. If situation had been different, because she did work, but she didn't have a college degree, and the job she had paid decent, but still didn't pay good enough to really be she wasn't a career woman. The job didn't pay that well, and so she didn't have the high hypergamy, and all that, but she still got married at 23, and as she said, that was considered old back then. around people she knew, most of them got married 18, 19 years old, probably, 18, 19, 20 years old. Uh, and I had my aunts all married young. Now, there was divorces and there was things that happened, but I mean, they all got married young. Of course, women, they all got married young. Um, and so, of course, obviously, the men they married. And I have an uncle who got married before he met my aunt. He had been married, got divorced. I don't know what happened. They said, I think it was something like adultery or something, but they got divorced. He got remarried pretty quickly. I'd say probably no later than a year, So, that's pretty quick. And they were still young, like, what, 21? Yeah, because he was the same age as my mother, but their kids were older than us because my mom and them didn't have kids till later. But I'm not sure if he got married before my mom did the second time. I'm not sure. But still, not very old. Obviously, no later than probably about 22, 23 years old. So what did they know about us? Nothing. They don't know anything. They have no clue, man. And many of them, just like my uncle, got divorced, remarried my aunt, and was married up until her death. 30-something years later. So now he's alone now. He has an idea now. And I'm not going to go into, his life, anything like that on here, but I'm just saying, he married, but was married for well over 30 years. So what in the world would they know about this? Of course, the answer is nothing. They don't have any knowledge of this. And they don't realize, how easy they had it. And I'm not trying to criticize them. It would probably be the same thing if it was them having the problem and we weren't, right? We would be the same way. We'd be, what is wrong with you, man? Just blah, 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 blah. And they don't put themselves in your shoes at all. And I had so much better than I was going to put this, but this is sort of my issue, but trying to think of, what I'm saying, because I got it all in my head, but that's the point. They don't understand. They didn't have to suffer like this. I think Todd, Grotesque Subhuman on his channel, said his parents got married, I think, might have been right out of high school, just similar to my mom and them, and they're still married. What do they know about this? Nothing. There's no way they could know this. And they can't understand it because they never went through loneliness. Being alone. Yeah, you can have a bad marriage. I don't know what their marriage is like or anything, but you can have a bad marriage and all that stuff. But you're not alone. You're not by yourself. You're not going sexless. Well, some marriages are going sexless, but I don't think every marriage is. They're having sex. They're not going with that. And of course, they're not virgins. They're married. His parents had kids, so they're not virgins. My mom's not a virgin. She had 2 kids. My dad's not a virgin. He had 2 kids. Aunts and uncles had children. They're not virgins, right? So they don't understand this at all. They don't get it, and they can't put themselves in your shoes because they're not studious. Their life was like this. They born, grew up, went to school, graduated or dropped out. Some of them probably, dropped out. I'm going to get married, boom, have kids, get married, get a decent job, have kids, boom. And that's it. Until, one of them dies or, I know there were divorces. Like I said, I'm not going to go into that. But, there you go. And, oh, by the way, I guess I could go into this. Most of them, when they got divorced or if they lost somebody, they remarried as quickly as they could. I wonder why. They were out meeting people as quick as they could, and they got married as quick as they could. Sounds like they were having problems. It was hard for them to be alone, sounds like. Maybe they might have understood our situation just a little bit. Most of us have been, in that sense, alone our whole lives. I've never had a date. I've obviously never been in a relationship. I've obviously never been married. Never had sex. Never really had real friends. I've had a couple, in my life. By the way, most of my family, they had friends growing up. They don't know anything of what we're dealing with. Nothing. They had everything in life that made life livable. Okay, people can say, well, you don't understand, y'all got all the technology and everything like they have, which, by the way, I think is hurting our country, but that's a story for another day. So I don't think technology is as great as we think it is. I actually, to be honest, I hate technology, but I ain't gonna go into that. But they'll say things like that, and I'm going, like my mom, she grew up on a farm, worked hard. Fair enough. I agree with that. I didn't grow up on a farm. I don't know that. But what did she have that you didn't have? She had things that made life worth living. She had friends growing up. Of course, she had good parents. She had both of her parents. Decent parents. Not a perfect marriage, but no marriage is. Didn't have a ton of money, but I mean, if you took that out, she was pretty good. Had both of her parents, had plenty of cousins, and had 2 sisters. They were close. She had all of those things. And, they were close. They had good relationships. They fought like any kids, but they had good relationships. They were close to each other. They were family. They loved each other. She had that. She had many friends. I know she talked about having tons of friends in school. She wasn't like the most popular kid, but she had plenty of friends. That about being the most popular kid in school. She had friends. She dated a little bit, not a lot, but she dated. She had several boyfriends. To me, if you've had, in your lifetime at least, and I'm talking about it for a woman, because we don't know, the situation with men is different. With a woman, if you've had at least 5 boyfriends, and I'm not talking about sleeping around and all that, if you've had at least 5 boyfriends, that's pretty healthy, I think, in your life. That means you had a pretty healthy, love life and relationship life. And for a man, I think 5, and I don't mean nowadays, I meant back then, 5, that's pretty normal. That's pretty good. They had all that. My dad had plenty of friends. His home life wasn't the best because my grandparents drank, but he was spoilt rotten. So my dad had a very good life in that way. They weren't rich, but they did everything for him. When he turned 16, he got a car. Not a new car, but got a car at 16. That was still a big deal back in those days. Got a car, and he also got a motorcycle at that age. 16 years old. I obviously had none of those things. Of course, my situation was different. I didn't drive, but still, I didn't have any of that. And my dad, I'm pretty sure, dated early. I think my dad was kind of a Chad. Obviously, I don't think he was a very bad-looking guy. I wish I could put a picture to show you what he looked like, but I don't want to do that and put a picture online. My dad was kind of a Chad. I think he had the personality of a Chad. He was definitely a normie, at least in his personality. He was actually very outgoing. My dad actually had dark triad traits, which, as we all know, makes men appealing to women. We know that women are going to find that attractive. And on top of it, he was not ugly. He was good looking. He wasn't short. He was at least about, I'd say he was about 6 feet. So that's a decent height for a guy. It's not tall, but it's not short. That's a good height. He had all the things, in my family, that's what I'm saying. They had the things a lot of us didn't have. And they had it all in a package. They had it all in one little package. And they were, excuse me, my lungs are so stopped up all the time. They had a lot of, sorry about that button over here is getting pushed. There we go. Sorry about that. These people don't understand because they had everything you didn't have. So they don't realize it. They probably think, and I do agree with this, we were good kids, unlike y'all. And don't get me wrong, do I think their morals might have been a little bit better than ours? Yeah, probably. But severely better? Not so sure about that. If they had been presented with some of the things we were presented with, would they have turned out differently? Probably not. And I'll give you a perfect example. Men do not grow up unless they get married a lot of times. I mean, they'll eventually have to grow up. You got to take care of yourself. That's what I'm facing now. But, you eventually got to grow up a little bit. You have to. You won't survive. Even in this comfortable society. But you don't have to grow up like you once did. You don't have to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And one of the things that made men grow up, and it was really the main thing, was marriage. And if a man didn't get married, I actually thought Jordan Peterson did a really good job in a video talking about this. I mean, it's known. It's not like it's a new thing, but it's definitely known. It's Peter Pan syndrome. Like Jordan Peterson said, a lot of men, if they get married, they'll grow up. Not every man, but a lot of men they'll grow up. They'll get a good job. They'll take care of the family. They'll pay the bills. And they'll grow up. If they don't, they stay Peter Pan, as he called it. They'll stay a kid and do whatever, right? They won't grow up. Back then, it was drinking and partying. Today, it's, drinking and partying, doing drugs, unfortunately. Those three things, not the best thing for you. They play video games all day. Some, guys will do that. Sports fanaticism, just being completely addicted to sports, that can happen. So you have a lot of things and men will not grow up because they have no reason to grow up. As he said, who wants to grow up, right? Nobody does. And, my uncle said when my aunt passed away, it was funny that he mentioned this. Said when he was young, and he was talking about, before he met my aunt, that he had been married before, had gotten divorced. I didn't know the whole details of it, but they had gotten divorced. He had no kids by his first marriage, and they got divorced. And he said, I was back to partying, drinking, and this was what he said, partying and drinking and driving my parents crazy. He wasn't growing up. He went right back to being a kid again. The marriage ended. He was back home. I think living with his parents again. And, being immature, partying, drinking, not really taking no responsibility. Was he out looking for a big-time job? Was he out looking for, I got to really start growing up and go to college and get that good job? No, he wasn't doing any of that. He went right back to a young person. Well, what would he have been like if he had to grow up like we did? Couldn't get married. Couldn't get a date. Let me say this. Let's say, he got married, but she left him. And he got married again, and she left him. Let's just use that. Let's say he had married twice, and both the women just treated him like crap. Let's say he couldn't get a date. Let's say he never got a date, or very rarely had gotten a date in his life. Would he have grown up? He might have tried some things to get women. He might have beta-buxed a little bit. He might have, gotten a good job, but a lot of times they don't. Men don't do that. They don't get a good job until they get married. But, he might have done some things. He might have, I don't know how they would have done it back then, but he might have maybe tried to lose weight. He was pretty tall, so he had a Chad-like quality. He's very tall. He was 6'3". But, that's what I'm saying. Was he growing up? No, he went right back to a child. He would have been us today, or people like us. He would have either drank and partied, because that's about all you had back then, or he probably, if he'd been today, played video games, watched TV or something all day long, been on YouTube all day long. Can't think of anything else, but you get what I'm saying here. He wouldn't have grown up. He'd have just been being wild and doing other stuff. So we have to remember that and be a little merciful to them. They just don't know what it's like. They don't realize how important marriage is for society, how important it is for men, how important it is for women, how important it is for everything, because we don't promote it. Hollywood doesn't promote it, media doesn't promote it. And the man's got to do everything. We know all this. And I guess we have to be a little merciful, but, they have to be a little bit understanding of us as well. A lot of men just don't have anything to live for. They have nothing to be proud of. And I think until they understand this, it's just going to be like this for all of us. And by the way, just like today, a lot of obviously Chads will never understand, what we're going through now, ever. High tier normies, no way. Not going to understand it, especially if they, at least have a decent dating life. They're not going to get it. They might understand a little bit, but not much. Low tier normies, now that's where we're getting into our category. They're going to understand. It's tough. I'm having trouble getting a date. I get dates, that's what they'll be thinking. I get dates, but boy, it's hard to get in a relationship, and it's hard to keep a woman, and boy, it is kind of different. Boy, my parents got married young. What's going on? And that's how they'll come to the knowledge of it, a lot of them, and some of them will come to that knowledge. But a lot of them won't. They'll just deny it and say it's our fault, and we just have to be merciful with people. But we have to remember that the reason a lot of people do not understand us is they just never had to live like we did. They just didn't. And I wanted to leave, I meant to mention this earlier. Like I said, you have to pardon, my mind just kind of goes off. It's not real good anymore. I'm getting older, and I've been destroyed by medications and autism and everything else. But talking about Chads, the Chad sleeps around with lots of women, and he can. But back when my parents were younger, at least around here, the Chad could still get sex. Yeah, there were some women that would put out, that he could pump and dump, or, whatever, But most of the time, he had to put a ring on it. Women just, it was too, the social approval was terrible for a woman if she had sex out of marriage, especially if she got pregnant. So they didn't risk it a lot. The Chad still had to marry. He could live maybe that lifestyle for a little while, but not very long. Eventually, social pressure, women, not wanting to get pregnant, women being, because of our Christian society, which I would have been thankful for, looked down on it. A woman sleeping around, and like I said, wanting her to get married and hurry up and get a family. They were going to make you have to put a ring on it, even Chad. So Chad had to get married. He had to put the ring on it and settle down. So see, once again, what did he do? Did he just say, I ain't doing that, I'm going to sleep around and have sex? No. I don't need marriage. It's not that big of a deal. Women ain't that big of a deal. No, he didn't say that. Most of them got married. And if they got divorced, any of them, Chads, Giga Chad, Chad Light, normies, any of them got divorced, what usually happened? Most of them jumped right back on the saddle and went right back out looking. Some got married very quickly, some a little later, but what happened? They all got married again. So they don't know what we're going through. Actually they do, some of them just don't care. Because they'll never know how hard it is. I mean, today with the bars and the clubs, there weren't bars and clubs around here when my parents were younger. You didn't have any of that. To do anything like that back then, you'd had to travel a couple of hours away. And most people didn't do that back then. And other than bars and clubs, which didn't exist around here, now we have those. Even in my small town. Makes it worse. It makes women worse. It does. Makes men worse too, but definitely makes women worse because they benefit the most. And then number two, the internet didn't exist when they were younger. They have no idea about that. Online dating didn't exist. Dating apps didn't exist. Well, we have all of that now. And the crowning blow was dating apps. It just made everything 10 times worse. Because, like I said, I don't believe the majority of Americans are using dating apps. I don't think many are using it as much as they're saying they are, to meet their significant other. But they're using it, and it is growing. And if it ever does get up to that 40 and 50%, we're in a lot of trouble. Marriage and relationships is just gonna plummet. And our parents and grandparents, they just don't have any idea of this. And that's what we have to just remember. They don't know, man. They just don't know. So I guess that's about all I got to say on that. I hope that I didn't ramble too much. I was trying to make it cohesive. It's so hard for me right now. But when I have a good thought, I want to talk about it. That's just who I am. That's what I do. So take care, guys. Have a good one. We'll talk to you some other time. Thanks.